Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on. Always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And welcome in, everyone, to this edition of the Labor and Energy Show with J-Doc and Krausey as we come to you with another week. J-Doc, how are you? Great show lined up for our listening and our viewing audience today. Excited to get into it. A quick shout out, J-Doc, out to Neuter. I spoke with Cole Jenkins this morning from Neuter, and they're going to continue their support of the Labor and Energy Show. And the one interesting dynamic from that we're going to work on with Cole is we're going to start to add some blogging into the Labor and Energy Show as we continue to expand and change the narrative.
Absolutely, Joe. We're very appreciative of Neuter and Cole Jenkins and the whole Neuter team. And, for our listeners, it's fantastic to continue, our journey in common sense and energy. Okay. Talking to the who's who and in labor and energy. This our opening month in Western Pennsylvania as we continue on down up the Mid-Atlantic as our launch in KDKA. We've had unbelievable guests. We've got the new StreamYard video platform, and we're expanding constantly. So it's great to hear that a lot of our sponsors and supporters are gaining momentum and sticking with it. And as we grow, obviously, our listener response has been incredible. And again, our goal is to educate the public on common sense and energy in layman's terms. You and I are regular guys, and, we thought we understood things. We didn't have a clue. And so I believe it's our job to introduce the who's who in labor and energy, which, by the way, today we got a great show, and to continue to educate the public.
Reminder to all of our listeners and viewers, if you miss any of today's show, or if you want to go back and watch or listen to one of the previous editions of the Labor and Energy Show, you can go to your favorite podcast destination, Apple or Spotify, search the Labor and Energy Show, and you can easily download the podcast and consume some of the content. And we've had some great shows, including the last couple of weeks here have been phenomenal shows. J-Doc, tell us about our special guest today and our topic, and then we'll get to a break and then pick up with John on the other side.
So, Joe, we have John Bain, who's the Director of Government Affairs at EQT. Okay, we've been talking a lot on our shows about natural gas, okay, and for good reason. American natural gas, specifically Pennsylvania, is growing increasingly important, not just for domestic, but for global energy security. It's also important to maintain our way of life, okay? And despite what a lot of folks not wanting to admit it, for lowering emissions. I mean, a huge part of our success in lowering emissions is due to natural gas. And so today we have, like I said, John Bain on the show, Director of Government Affairs for EQT, based in Pittsburgh. EQT is the largest gas producer in the Appalachian Basin and one of the largest in the country. So I couldn't be happier to have John on. Johnson, by the way, not a stranger to the broadcast. He's been on before, and I'm excited about today's show.
All right, good stuff. This is the Labor and Energy Show with J-Doc and Krausey. We'll get started with John Bain on the other side of the break. Back in a moment.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live,
And the big story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show, we welcome everybody back in and thank everybody for tuning in and listening in. I'm Joe Kraus along with J-Doc. And of course, J-Doc, as you referenced, John Bain will be our special guest. We'll do two good segments with John, and I'll toss it over to you so we can get started.
Thanks, Joe. First of all, John, I want to welcome you to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. And first, I'd like to, if you would, introduce yourself. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, okay, and what you do in your position as the Director of Government Relations at EQT.
Yep. Thank you again for having me. I am Director of Government Affairs here at EQT. We are the largest producer of natural gas in the country, based out of Pittsburgh, as you referenced. And sometimes, and I think you said earlier, putting things in layman terms makes it a lot easier for the listeners. So I can tell you that our natural gas that we are producing today is the equivalent of over 1 minute of every hour of electricity consumed in the United States. So, I mean, that is a big number. That is at scale. If we were a country, EQT would be number 12 in the world in natural gas production, just EQT alone.
And so, yeah, and we're going to get into EQT and you know, what you guys do, and especially, you know, also for the workforce and the communities and you know, the vast resources we have here. But I'd like to talk about in your capacity of the Director of Government Relations at EQT and as chair of the Marcellus Shale Coalition Executive Board. What are some of the challenges you face every day in your dealings with political leadership, and also talk about the progress that we've made in those areas as well?
Yep. So in my function at EQT, it goes back to, I'll just give you a little background of how I ended up here where I am today. Years ago, gosh, now it's over 20 years ago, so I'm starting to feel older. I took on an internship with Congressman Tim Holden here in Pennsylvania. That went on to propel me into the state government, where I worked for Governor Rendell. I did some labor work for PSEA. Then I ended up right here in the natural gas industry. And part of my job as the Director of Government Affairs, I consider it almost you're half advocate and half watchdog. So we're looking at new policies that come out every day. Sometimes we're prepared. We like to work with people on the front end of policy issues to make sure that our expertise is in the room. And that's policy issues that we can be for, or maybe we don't fully support. But at EQT, the stakeholders on all levels are very critical to our mission. So I cover Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. I do some DC work. And, you know, again, it goes back to sort of the watchdog here for the company, and different proposals come out on all levels of government. And, you know, we can't overlook the local government as well. And we have a local government affairs team that does one heck of a job with local ordinances and other issues that come up. But as of late, and I've seen it in the last few years, it seems that our industry, the attacks on our industry are growing and growing and growing. And that is one thing that it's hard to beat back. I mean, there's a very vocal, I would say, minority that specifically comes after our industry. And don't get me wrong, some people will say that all environmental groups are bad. That's not true. We work very closely with some environmental advocacy groups who understand that, you know, in order for all of us to succeed, we have to work together and look at this as all of the above. And quick example, you mentioned Marcellus Shale Coalition. In the past several years, as you guys know, when it comes to stakeholders, we brought to the table organized labor, which is something that I think is big progress for the industry. I mean, years and years ago, I think there was always one of the things was I call it the license plate problem. You go to a drill site and you're not seeing Pennsylvania or West Virginia license plates, you're seeing plates from somewhere else. And it put the industry in a bad light. And now it's almost like people are learning the industry, first of all. As you know, Ken Broadbent out in Western PA, they have an excellent training facility. And they do great work. I mean, it's second to none. And it's partnering with labor that I think helps us first qualified workforce. And people are being taken care of. They're making good money. They do a good job, and they're focused on safety, which is something that we're very focused on at EQT. But second, it goes back to my position as government affairs. In the halls of the Capitol or the halls of Congress, when you walk in from a natural gas company by yourself,
right,
it's not always as valuable than if I were to walk in there with the UA or another union group. I think you see different perspectives.
And let me jump in there for a second, John, because there's so much that you touched on. By the way, Joe Krausey and I got, involved in this. Obviously we've been doing the labor show in the Philadelphia region for a long time, and they had the issue at PES refinery. Okay. Yep. And a lot of our labor leaders came to us and said, we have to do shows on this. We've been doing a labor show here in Philly for 9 years. And we typically get a lot of cooperation from our political leaders. I mean, it's Philadelphia is a small, big market. Obviously, we know it was crickets, and one unit down, 30 out of 33. They shut the refinery down. We had workers in, union officials. It was heartbreaking because they were losing their livelihoods, and some of them been there for decades, and it didn't make sense. So that's obviously when we got involved. And as we launched the Labor and Energy Initiative, we realized, like Joe and I, look, I'm a labor guy and a regular guy, from the neighborhood. We had the same perspectives when it came to energy and emissions and fracking and all those things. Had really, we were just uneducated. Okay, so I guess you would call it. We always say it, kitchen table environmentalists, right? Not educated, didn't understand. One of the things and the reasons was because the narrative, you don't hear anything else. So when you start to hear the common sense part about, one of the things we talk about a lot is, people talk about the transition to renewables, and renewables are obviously coming into the market. But some of the most passionate people about the environment are our energy leaders. Okay, that run the companies and run the organizations. Okay, so we were educated like there was no tomorrow, and educating the general public to the fact that we cannot just shut the switch and then you go to all renewables tomorrow, and there's 10,000 reasons why, and none of us are hearing any of them. So that's the point of why we're here. One of the things I wanted to say, bring up, you're unique. You have a very unique background, okay, in regards to your labor and energy background, okay? And I wanted to bring that up because EQT, biggest producer of natural gas in the country, you're clearly a high-profile individual in the energy sector, but you have a family lineage that has to do a lot with labor, and I think lends itself a lot to a great perspective when you talk about your great workforce. Talk about that and with the United Mine Workers and a little bit about that history.
Yep, 100%. So I grew up in the anthracite coal region in Schuylkill County, which is the sort of northeast part of the state, and like every other Irish family, most of our relatives you can trace back to Ireland, and they came here to get a job in the coal mines because frankly they were starving back at home.
By the way, my family's from Mahanoy City.
So is mine. My grandmother's
We're probably related, John.
Well, listen, since we're throwing it out there, I'm from Schuylkill County as well.
Yeah.
Little town Minersville, John. So the three of us attacking it all from that,
Probably all related.
part.
Yeah.
I was just in Wyoming. I ran into a woman. She's from Mount Carmel. Another guy was from from Orwigsburg in Schuylkill County. So I guess everybody came here to work in the mines.
Absolutely.
But I would say the labor history in my family would date all the way back to, and I have to be careful about statute of limitations here, guys, but the Molly Maguires, which was really, I mean, the start of the real organized labor movement.
Absolutely.
I mean, the conditions that they were working in were so terrible. Some folks didn't even get paid. They got stripped and had to go to the company store. They didn't even get wages. So it was a very difficult time. And I think it all dovetails very nicely with, where we are today compared to them. Safety, again, core value at EQT. The reason these individuals were fighting for their lives was because of lack of safety. And people were getting killed. And it wasn't once in a while. It was every day. In the meantime, they're fueling the Industrial Revolution. So that's a problem. That's not fair. My great-grandfather went on to be a United Mine worker and then ended up an organizer for the UMWA. And I still have the Western Union. It's in my office hanging up. It's a letter from John L. Lewis to my grandfather expressing his sympathy and thanking him for all the hard work of his father. So that in and of itself, I think it is a unique, again, backstory. Kid from the coal region. I knew nothing about gas when I came out of there. And now, here we are today.
Does it give you especially having that heritage? Because, having conversations with my father, who was a labor leader here in Philly for 40 years, gave me an understanding of workers' rights and understanding, the benefits of unions and obviously, like you said, safety, high skilled. You mentioned, Broadbent, Kenny Broadbent, and their training facility. And we just had Kenny on with Jimmy Snell and Rob Baer. It was our first show, when we expanded to the video platform and the or the Pittsburgh KDKA station. But does your background give you a kind of a knowledge and an understanding of your workers in regard and a perspective that may be different than other executives?
Yeah, I think it most likely it does. If people didn't grow up in an area where organized labor was so important, they may not understand it as well. But again, it goes back to the same way we're talking about energy. It's layman terms is how things have to be explained.
Absolutely.
And I think it cuts both ways. Some people have a negative view of organized labor until you explain it to them. And until you showcase the excellent work that organized labor does in a safe manner. And again, I'm going to keep saying safety. So, because that's one of our core values.
Absolutely.
I could go to a well site tomorrow as the director of government affairs. If I saw something going on that was not safe, I could stop work completely right then and there. Every employee at EQT knows that they have that ability.
And so having said that, let's talk a little bit about EQT, John. If talk about the jobs that the company provides, okay, roundabouts numbers on, like in other words, the magnitude of the workforce and the type of jobs that individuals get in relation to good paying, family sustaining jobs.
Yeah, I would say our industry provides some of the best compensation of any other industry in the country. So here at EQT, we have, I think we're up to around 700 employees. Obviously, there's quite a few who are in an office, but then we have our outside service providers, which their number, I believe, is in the thousands. And we've met with Ken Broadbent, some folks in Western PA, and there are union service providers. And I say Western PA because that's most of our core acreage. We do go all up into the Northeast as well and Central after a few acquisitions. But these are all great paying jobs, even union or non-union. We compensate employees very well. We're very focused on technology and doing things better and better every day. And technology is not just in the office. We have a digital work environment in the office, but on a well site. I'd love to bring you guys out for a tour just to see the operations. It really is amazing. And we're getting more and more efficient every day. I mean, we just drilled an 18,000 foot lateral out in Western PA. And just that number is amazing when you put it into perspective. That is a long lateral.
Absolutely.
John Bain is our special guest here on the Labor and Energy Show with J-Doc and Krausey as we continue to deliver the Labor and Energy Show. Just, John, one quick kind of a follow-up on one thing that you referenced when you were having some talk with in reference to the unions and to labor. I think there's a misunderstanding from the public in terms of in terms of what the real value is to the natural resources, to gas, and I think part of why we do this show is to try and punch holes in that misunderstanding. Do you feel that from ground level as well?
Yeah, I think there is a misunderstanding, as you said, and you heard me mention service providers. These aren't direct EQT employees, but they very well may be in a union.
Right.
When you look at I would say the lion's share of our relationship with organized labor, and maybe we can talk about this after the break, but is on pipelines. I mean, the number of jobs working on pipelines, that's the bread and butter of organized labor in Pennsylvania. That's John Bain's opinion.
and I'll tell you, so we've had Dave Callahan on many times. We just had him on with Rob Bear last week. And we're also proud of that partnership, okay, of utilizing and bringing the communities together, utilizing not only our leadership in labor, but also our man and woman power on the ground, okay, our political, relationships and connections. And we feel the same way, having that relationship. And you talk about the workforce, the subcontractors, if you will. Certainly, this industry, we have a lot on the line also. Okay, we have a lot to lose. There's so much to lose when it comes to people not being educated and understand. And in a sense, we feel like we're talking to our, to individuals, our family, our friends, a lot of people that are in our community that just don't understand like we didn't understand. I don't know what when we talk about Joe Kraus, how much time do we have to the break?
1 minute and 45 seconds, J-Duck.
Why don't we do this? Because we're going to talk about natural gas and a number of other topics. We're going to talk about permitting and permitting reform and a number of other things. Joe, why don't we head to the break early, and then we'll hit those topics and more when we come back.
Well, it scares me when you start producing the show, J-Doc. This is the Labor and Energy Show with J-Doc and Krausey. As J-Doc said, we will take a commercial break. We'll pick it up with John Bain on the other side.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live,
And the big story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Labor and Energy Show with J-Doc and Krausey. Thank you very much for tuning in, listening, or watching, viewing this week's edition of the Labor and Energy Show. Great conversation and a great guest, John Bain, joining us, J-Doc, for the full show. Again, a reminder for our listeners and viewers, if you miss any of today's program, or perhaps you want to go back and listen into one of our previous shows, just go to Apple or Spotify, search the Labor and Energy Show, and you can easily download the podcast, and you can listen to it while you walk. J-Doc, over to you, sir.
So let's spitfire a little bit, John. I want to talk. We're going to talk about something called the Page Coalition, but I want to talk a little bit about natural gas, okay, and educating the public. Let's talk about it and its benefits for energy generation in PA. In the U.S. and globally, okay? What should people know?
Well, I think they should know, and this dovetails into the Page conversation, that if we produce more natural gas globally, if we produce more natural gas and are able to export that overseas, it's the largest green initiative on the planet, bar none. The construction of new coal-fired power plants overseas is totally taking away all the progress we've made over the past 15 years in reducing emissions. It's incredible.
And we're going to get into that 100%.
Yep.
That is one of those points that we want to obviously, no pun intended, but drill down and educate people on that. We're going to talk about obviously the progress that's been made, the efficiency, the improvements in regards to, fracking and the environment. Certainly, like Dave Callahan said, when the process started years ago, yes, there needed to be improvements, but there have been a lot of improvements made, and also talk about it when you mention not only the environmental efficiency, but also in safety measures.
Yeah. I think if you look back to, around 2005, the early 2000s, when the unconventional drilling started in a big way at a large scale, and I'll just quick 30,000 foot, people were still looking for basically the secret sauce in how do we get this natural gas out of the ground, and how do we do it efficiently? And it took years to kind of get to where we are today. This goes back to what I mentioned earlier. We are drilling longer laterals, so it's we're disturbing less earth in that process, and we figured out that there's things that we can improve, and we are improving. I could tell you that EQT, we figured out that one of the biggest sources of our emissions were called pneumatic devices. We spent $28 million to replace all of our pneumatic devices, and it reduced our emissions in a big, big way. And a lot of other operators are looking at that, and they're doing it the same way. When it comes to the environment, we've seen legislation pass in Pennsylvania, Act 13. I think it was 2012, and it changed some of the ways we operate as far as unconventional operations are concerned. And it came down to regulating us, at the wellhead, on site, and changes such as that make a big difference. And we have to go through very, very stringent permit application processes, and to make sure we're doing things right. And the DEP in all 3 states, they check in on us. They're not shy, and we're fine with that. Our goal, again, is safety and doing things right.
And it's interesting because Dave Callahan said, listen, like you said, when the process started, there had to be changes made, rightfully so. And there's been a major commitment to those changes, like you're mentioning. and it's led to really we're the leader in a global sense of reducing emissions, and it's largely due to natural gas. What are we sitting on, in regards to the Marcellus Shale, in regards to the amount of natural gas? Talk about the magnitude there.
The magnitude is enormous. EQT alone, again, I said we'd be number 12 if we were a country. That's just us. When you combine the entire Appalachian Basin, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, we're the largest in the country when it comes to the amount of natural gas and natural gas reserves that we have. And we can get into this on the page conversation, but we're ready to power the world. I mean, we have a massive amount of gas, but we have a massive problem. We can't move that natural gas because we cannot construct new pipelines, and people are even canceling power plants now, and it's bad for the country. It's bad for the world.
And we saw that. I mean, $1 billion power plant. Just environmentalists, appealed it and appealed it and appealed it until the entire community wanted it. Yep. And the mayor actually talked about the devastation in the there's a Pennsylvania community where we lost that power plant.
John, what do you make of it? I mean, I sit and I hear that statement, and then I hear a big statement from you. We're ready to power the world, and yet here we sit, trying to understand why the narrative is working against us. I don't get it. I just can't figure it out. What's your thought on it?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a lot of funding to attack our industry from outside sources, which is no surprise. A lot of it, I think, is scare tactics. People are very concerned about the environment, as they should be. I think we're all environmentalists.
Sure.
At the end of the day, but it is the sort of that politics of fear, and I say this frequently, and I think we're moving away from this. But for years, I feel like the industry was apologizing for itself, and I don't think we should be doing that anymore. I think we need to really tout the benefits that the environment has because of our industry, and what we can do on a global scale. Because if we want to talk about global warming, let's talk about global warming.
That's right, absolutely. And now we're going to get into the Page Coalition conversation. I want to read something. I'm going to read it as fast as possible, but your CEO, Toby Rice, wrote this op-ed, okay? And this is something that is actually mind-boggling, but it encompasses everything we're talking about. Over the last 15 years, the U.S. has led the world in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, thanks in large part to our replacing coal with natural gas. From 2005 to 2019, the reductions from this fuel switching roughly equal the total emission reductions of the UK, Germany, Italy, and Japan combined. And those were the countries with the best track records for lowering emissions. Unfortunately, foreign coal usage exploded in 2021. And we talked about, and he mentioned from 2005 to 2019, the reductions. And in just 1 year, the increase in emissions surpassed all the emission reductions made by the U.S. solar and wind and energy since 2000. In 2022, the situation has been exacerbated by skyrocketing energy prices and Russia's war against Ukraine. Okay, a solution exists. It exists in Pennsylvania, and it's natural gas. This is a press release about the Page Coalition. Take it from there, John.
Well, you just took all my talking points, Joe.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
It's staggering, though, when you read that. I mean, it says so much.
Yeah, and it's common sense. And when you look at foreign coal, it's dirtier than the coal that we burn in the United States. It's full of things called lignite, which is just dirty coal that I don't quote me on this. I don't know if we'd even be allowed to burn that in the United States, but other countries are doing that.
But our environmental standards in the United States are so much more stringent than overseas, yet
Yep.
we're willing to shut ourselves down, okay, import those same resources. We all know that, emissions and the environment just doesn't cover the United States. So, when you mention global, people, got to, that's what we're talking about.
Yep. And the thing is, we're ready to deploy today. If we can put LNG on the water, we can reduce those international emission problems that we have, and we can do it. We're ready to deploy today. We need the infrastructure in place first, obviously. We would love to have something in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, one of the surrounding states, that could put that LNG on the water. But what we would have to do is quadruple U.S. LNG capacity to 55 BCF a day by 2030 to replace international coal. And that goes back to, we can do this. And Toby Rice is 100% spot on in the information that he put in that op-ed. But this would reduce international CO2 emissions by 1.1 billion tons by 2030. And all we'd have to do is add 50 rigs, build 6,500 miles of pipelines. Export capacity of LNG will be over 40 BCF a day. That is huge. And when you look at that, it goes back to, one, the emissions problem. That's what we're looking to solve. But two, when you look at energy and how the correlation between energy, lack of energy, and poverty, that's a big problem. And the facts show that if you can provide someone energy, you can bring them out of poverty. And that's part of this story as well. But again, we have to be able to deploy. And if we have pipelines that are just choked because we can't move any more gas, we won't be able to do this. And
that is the story, John.
Yeah,
I mean, that is the story. We have the ability to be self-sufficient. We have the ability to economically enjoy the benefit of what it means to be self-sufficient, and our communities and our families and our kids and our care and everything that's wrapped around 360 degrees of that statement are in a better position if we would just accept it.
And Joe, to share it with the world, okay? And John, I want to, really quickly break this down. In fact, that to the people, first off, the people understand that most of our progress regarding the reduction of emissions, which America has been the leader, okay, is due to natural gas.
Yeah. 60% reduction in emissions in the United States due to natural gas since 2005.
Okay, but my point is, does America understand that? Okay, that's so important that the public understands. Okay, the progress we've made. Okay, number one, the efficiency, the safety, the environmental. It's in a sense clean energy. Okay, and compared to the rest of the world, while we're shutting ourselves down, we're giving them the green light to utilize their coal resources to eat up all the progress we've made. Talk about, I'm wondering how many people actually understand that foreign coal has negated the significant U.S. emissions reductions. I mean, that's not something we hear. I mean, when you read that in Toby Rice's op-ed, I mean, it's such an eye-opener. Yeah. Okay, it's a game changer. People don't understand that. I can imagine, and the majority of us, by the way, the kitchen table environmentalists, not the real far lefters who you could say you could actually take them to the water and they won't drink it, do not understand that. And talk about what, and I'm going to ask you this question. I wanted to make those points, but talk about what your company sees as the potential for natural gas to lower the emissions globally. And you can, by the way, get into the numbers if you want.
Yeah, I mean, we have the opportunity, as I said, to reduce international CO2 emissions by 1.1 billion tons by 2030. But again, like I said, we can't deploy if we can't get a pipeline in the ground or build a new LNG facility, in the United States. When it goes to, as you said, does the general public or the kitchen table environmentalists understand the benefits of this industry? I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, where instead of apologizing for ourselves, we have to do a better job of telling our story. And that's why the Page Coalition is in place. That's where we're telling that story, and we're just getting started. But right now, we're bringing in LNG to Boston from overseas because we can't get a pipeline through New York.
Well,
Toby Rice's mom has oil heat.
Yeah. It's interesting. I want to spitfire because we only have 5 minutes left, but it's staggering. Let's talk a little bit about, the Page Coalition talks a lot about the need for permitting reform. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Congress took what I understand to be the first step in the debt ceiling bill, but obviously, recent, guests on our program want a lot more done. What's your opinion of the benefits of the permit reforms in the debt ceiling bill, and what else do you think needs to be done on permitting reform?
Yeah, I do think there were benefits, obviously, in that legislation, but there is more to be done. There's a lot of duplicative processes within the federal government that can be streamlined. A permit shouldn't have to go through 3 different agencies for 3 different reviews of essentially the same permit application. And I'll go to your kitchen table again. A permit is thousands and thousands of pages. It's not John Bain just filling out a form to put a roof on my house in South Philly, right? We're talking thousands and thousands of pages. And one of the biggest things that we've seen in the debt ceiling bill was it said that completing the Mountain Valley Pipeline is in the national interest. Congress is directing completion of that pipeline. And right now, it's back in the courts. They had to appeal to the Supreme Court. I mean, it's a shame. And that's a project that was $3 billion in the beginning. Guess how much they're at now? Guess how much money they've spent on that project?
How much?
$6 billion. And it's because of activists, period.
Who's going to invest in that type of energy infrastructure? And if this is possible, I mean, you're talking obviously reduce. If we can get the permitting reform, where it should be. I mean, I believe there's a 4.5-year environmental process to just get started when you talk about pipelines. Okay, yep. Getting rid of the red tape. Obviously, we need to go through a process. And I think we're going to, we're coming to the end of it. I just want to talk.
I think the political leaders have to cut through the red tape, J.
Well,
Doc.
Yeah,
I mean,
4.5
years. I mean, somebody needs to stand up.
Well, the president
and do it.
Well,
right?
The ceiling bill was supposed to do that, and clearly, there needs to be more progress in that because there's still gridlock, and environmentalists are still being able to shut these things down with appeals. Before we roll out, I want to just touch real quick about liquefied natural gas in Pennsylvania. So we have a lot of conversations on the show about the potential for Pennsylvania LNG. You touched on it, especially in the Philly region. You touched on that, John. What do you think the prospects are for Philly to become an LNG export powerhouse, and what needs to be done to make it happen?
If we did not have activists fighting a project and issues with permitting, we could start tomorrow.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to telling our story. Organized labor is doing a great job. I know Jimmy Snell wants something in the Southeast.
Yeah.
He's so sick and tired of all the jobs in the West.
Yeah.
But it comes down to just activists. And there was a plant scheduled, an LNG facility in Wyalusing, Pennsylvania, that was canceled. They're just not, they wouldn't do it. So it comes down to us explaining it. There's going to have to be political will to do it. And, outside of the president using the Defense Production Act, I don't understand. It's going to be very, very difficult.
We'll talk about, if we did have that, because it's centrally located, if we did have, and Jimmy Snell, we've talked about it 100 times, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, and on air too, by the way. But talk about the benefits, not only locally, but, we saw what's going on in the Ukraine with Russia, cutting them off. What could we do to help national security if we had these resources here in the Philly region?
Yeah, we have the ability, I would say, to de-weaponize energy in the world. We have the ability, as the United States of America, we have the resources to prevent other countries from using energy as a weapon. And I would say, period, end of statement. That's the resource that we have right now to provide energy security, both here at home and across the world. And security, I would say, is the operative word in that sense.
John, we really appreciate your time. I mean, we got so much. We're leaving a lot on the table. We'll save it for the next time. But we really appreciate your time. Obviously, John Bain, Director of Government Affairs for EQT. Awesome segment, my friend.
Yeah, guys, I really appreciate what you're doing and getting the word out there on our industry and organized labor. You're doing a fantastic job. So keep up the good work. Congratulations on expanding. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need anything from me.
Good stuff. John Bain joining us here on the Labor and Energy Show. As Jimmy Snell often says, the Green Mafia. You've got to beat the Green Mafia. Back in a moment.
Absolutely.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live,
And the big story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with J-Doc and Krausey. Just a couple of minutes remain in this hour. Again, don't forget to download today's edition of the show on Apple or Spotify. Just search the Labor and Energy Show. Good conversation, J-Doc, with John Bain. A lot there. Hard to cover some of the ground. But boy, every show that I listen to, I just don't understand the reality of why we can, or not we, but why the public doesn't see the real value supported by the facts versus that other narrative. Frustrating for me.
It's interesting. You mentioned you left the segment with, you mentioned, defeating the Green Mafia. Okay, like Jimmy Snell says. I mean, you're dealing with a very fanatical group of people that don't want to hear about the true energy education and knowledge of what it takes to obviously energize a region and a country, the realities of it, and at the same time, obviously, we're shutting, like John Bain said, we're shutting down our own resources and bringing those same resources in from other countries that are doing it a lot, less clean, dirtier. The Page Coalition and Toby Rice mentions, obviously, all the progress we've made since 2005 was negated in 1 year, okay, from overseas coal production, okay, and the people just obviously aren't either getting that information or don't care. And it's our job to make sure people understand, yes, there's a transition where, renewables are coming into the market. No one's fighting that. We all care about the environment, Joe. But we need to understand about our energy infrastructure, how impactful it is, our traditional energy infrastructure, how it works incredibly well as we bring in renewables into the market, and how important it is to our country and the world. So, I mean, poverty, like John Bain said, energy poverty across the globe. Okay, our energy infrastructure here, Marcellus Shale, we're sitting on such an incredibly resourceful situation. Okay, and it's cleaner. It's cleaner for the environment. It's safer, and we just got to get the word out, man.
Great way to wrap up today's edition of the Labor and Energy Show with J-Doc and Krausey. Again, special thanks to John Bain for joining us for the full show today. That's going to do it for this edition of the Labor and Energy Show. On behalf of my partner, J-Doc, on behalf of Kateri, who's producing Behind the Glass, I'm Joe Kraus. See you next time, everybody.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow, to get your feet wet and your wheels spinning. One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away. Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live,
And the big story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.